I think that TV musicals are an incredibly powerful tool, and I think that when done right, it can be a very enjoyable presentation, and I think when done wrong, it can be awful. Greetings and salutations. It's time to sit down, put in those earbuds so as not to disturb the neighbors, and join us for the second episode of Off Book, a podcast where we talk about Broadway, movies, TV shows, and anything else we want to geek out about. I'm Marc Stoufer III.
And I'm Szurna. Today we're going to talk about live TV musicals.
I think that the idea of live TV musicals is always something that's intrigued me because I think that Broadway is awesome, obviously, but I think that it's such an exclusive thing because tickets are so ridiculously expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that they're expensive for a reason, because shows are expensive to make. And so I think if you're going to have to, if you have to pay for a lot of things, you're going to have to earn that money back somehow. But I think that in order for a show to make a profit, it means the unintended side effect is not a lot of people can go see it. And I think that live TV musicals help to kind of introduce new people to theater, and also is a way for Broadway shows to get an audience that they wouldn't normally be able to get because it doesn't cost a bajillion dollars.
Yeah, and with that, either, you were talking about the money and stuff, sometimes obviously we'll have to pay money. It's TV, to rent the movie or whatever, but it's so much more accessible to people who don't have that ability to save up enough money to go to New York or Chicago and or anywhere where there's really a big Broadway audience. And I think that's what makes these TV musicals very special.
And I think there's something to be said about the fact that these shows are working with generally they're big network companies that have the budget to sink in, and they don't necessarily need to earn every single penny of that back because they're getting views to the channel. I mean, generally people aren't going to buy a subscription to that network just to watch that, but they're going to have more people watching it, which is the goal for that. And instead of profits, it's more getting more people to watch your channel and then go, oh, look, this channel has other things. And so I think that one of the reasons that those work so well is because it requires less from the network to get them to say, okay, let's spend a lot of money, which means that the production value can be higher without increasing the cost of seeing.
Yeah, and with that, then it will be able to go to other streaming services such as Netflix and Hulu and stuff like that, which can make it very accessible to those people. And if people don't have cable,
Right. And I think that the other thing is that live TV musicals are so different than pro shots. I mean, they're very similar in a lot of ways, but I think that the fact that it isn't just a regular, a pro shot is essentially just the Broadway musical. Sometimes, with Hamilton on Disney Plus, like we talked about last week, you'll find that it's been specifically created to work in a format. A lot of times it's just we put some cameras on stage and this is the show. Whereas these live TV musicals are made to be on TV. And so I think that because of all those elements, it's kind of a nice middle ground for someone who isn't used to theater, where it's not some people on a stage, but it's also not a TV show. So it's that kind of gateway drug almost into the world of theater. Not that you should do drugs. No, don't do drugs. That was an analogy.
So for me, the first TV musical I had ever seen was The Sound of Music when I was young.
Okay, yeah.
And to this day, that is still one of my favorites. I have seen Rent live, but I still enjoy The Sound of Music so much, and it just holds a special place in my heart. And so I think with that was one of my first exposures to Broadway, and that TV show, or not TV show. Well, I guess it would be a TV show. Yeah, I guess.
It's kind of both.
Yeah, exactly. And so that just kind of opened my eyes to different things that I wouldn't normally be open.
Well, and I think The Sound of Music was also one of the first, if not the first, that I had seen. And what sticks with me is how well they use that format. I distinctly remember in one of the scenes, they were transitioning from the nunnery into the home of Von Trapp's, and one of the walls actually lifted up, and the camera followed her through the wall. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because you can't do that in traditional theater because of the restrictions of seeing everything all the time. But because the audience is a camera, they can move around what you see, and I think that is capitalizing on that format, just like Hamilton did in its own way, to create an experience that even if you like theater, you wouldn't be able to get. Even if you went and saw The Sound of Music on Broadway, you wouldn't be able to get that same experience through watching this, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk plenty about Rent Live in a little bit, but I think that despite all the things that it may have missed the mark on, I think that one of the things that it did amazingly is the set, and I think that that's one of the things that you can do the most with because you can have a 360-degree set. I mean, Rent Live it was essentially a warehouse, but they had balconies and ladders and staircases, and they had windows and doors and furniture everywhere, and they could constantly change what location was what. It almost looked more like a soundstage than a theater production. And I think that that is something that fit that show so well and can continue to create that new experience.
One other thing that I think these kind of like Broadway and like the TV shows, it can play an impact on like modern TV shows. Like one of my favorites is Glee. And in that show, it's not like surround just Broadway. It gives like a sense of all musical, but it does have a very decent amount of exposure to Broadway. And that's where I found some of my favorite shows was through that TV show. And it can appeal to the audience of teens and other people who wouldn't think of Broadway as their type of thing, but then they see this TV show and they're like, oh, maybe it is.
Yeah, I think that it does a nice job of, and both Glee and something like a live musical does a nice job of kind of tying the two worlds together from something that, I mean, really it works both ways in some regards, where you're familiar with one medium and it's the intersection of both of those mediums, so you get introduced to the other one, which is a very vague sentence, but it works. So
yeah.
And now it's time to hear from our sponsor. Do you have a musical you want put on TV? Well, there's one part of the process that everyone always overlooks.
The actors?
Nope.
The music?
Nope.
The costumes?
Still no.
Okay, I give up.
It's the warehouse. Every good TV musical needs a good warehouse to film it in. And luckily, Dave's live TV adaptations of Broadway musicals' warehouses to film them in warehouse rentals has got you covered. With big warehouses, small warehouses, blue warehouses, and green warehouses, Dave's live TV adaptations of Broadway musicals' warehouses to film them in warehouse rentals has a warehouse for every kind of show. So visit www.davesliveTVadaptations of Broadway musicals warehouses to film them in warehouse rentals.com/buy them today. That's www.davesliveTVadaptations of musicals to make your very specific dream just as specific, but now a little bit more expensive. And now back to the main program. So you had talked about The Sound of Music, and I think that is these live TV musicals often do very well or very not well, and I think that it hardly ever just goes because you have, on the one hand, you have people going, okay, I don't know what this show is. I've never seen Rent. I've never seen The Sound of Music. I've never seen any number of other shows. And I don't like it now because this wasn't a good show. And then you have the theater kids going,
you messed up that show, and that's awful, and you should be ashamed of yourself. I'm going to stop watching NBC.
And I think that polarization splits them really well into this either did well or not. And I think The Sound of Music falls, at least for me, pretty heavily on does good or does well, whichever one is proper grammar. I'll look that up.
Yeah.
side of the fence.
I believe it does well.
I don't know. Superman does good. That one did well.
Yeah. I do definitely think that I had never seen like The Sound of Music as a live show. I might have. I'm not 100% sure. But I do think that the TV version was a pretty good adaptation, I guess, Like I did listen to the music, but I had never like actually seen the show. But from what I could tell, it made me want to see the show. So I would say that's a win for them.
Yeah, I think in the end it really comes down to, and we've talked about this a couple different times, these productions need to accept the fact that they don't really belong in either category. Mm-hmm. Because I think if they're trying to be a TV show that's also a musical, it's not going to work. If you're trying to just be a theater production on TV, you're not a pro show. It's not going to work. But I think that The Sound of Music does a pretty good job of saying we're not either one, we're kind of both. So there are times when a scene is staged like it's on TV, and you have this fully built set. You have the multiple camera angles. And there were times when it's like a theater production, and you all know this isn't exactly what there's a painted backdrop here, but it's theater, so deal with it. And then there were times when it's kind of both, and you have, like I mentioned before, the walls can open up, and you can have these scene transitions so that really don't happen either in theater or in TV, and are really just this creation of really only the live TV musicals. And I think that understanding that that's the only way to succeed is one of the best ways to help them succeed.
I honestly have not seen a lot of like bad ones. To me, a majority that I've seen are like decent. They're pretty good from like the originals. But have you like seen any that are specifically horrible and would not recommend?
I think maybe it's just the theater kid in me. I haven't seen any that I wouldn't see again. So I mean, there's Sound of Music level that I thought was pretty good. There were some. Have you seen Jesus Christ Superstar live?
Yes, I have. That is one I have seen.
Yeah, I kind of fell somewhere down the middle, and I know I just said people don't do that, but I did. I think that there were some elements like this set. I really like this set, and I think that the performers were pretty good. I just don't think that it was, to me, I mean, it was billed, to its credit, it was billed as an in-concert. And I think that's what they gave us. They gave us essentially a theater production that was filmed, but it wasn't, and it was a concert. And I think that it was almost there to that Sound of Music level of ingenuity, but I think that it landed more on the side of this is a theater production that we're also filming, but also it's a concert. I think it just had a little bit of a lack of identity there, and I think that's really the only thing for me that makes me go, yeah, you didn't do anything that blew my socks off or made me upset, so yeah.
Yeah. Another like example I give of that like is kind of like it was good, but it was more of a concert was the original TV adaptation of Les Mis. I've seen it in person and I've seen that version and the movie version.
Okay.
And that version was always just kind of weird to me because they kind of just stood at a mic and sang. Like to me it felt more of a concert rather than a like Broadway production.
And there's nothing wrong with the concert as long as you don't try to make it seem as if it's going to be a live musical. And I think that there are too many shows that want to capitalize on live musical, and so we're saying
it's a live musical, but there's not a set of costumes. It's just some people in a top hat that are singing into a microphone on stage. That's a live musical, right? Is that what these are?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one show that I probably wouldn't watch again. Like I love the live show itself. The music is amazing, and I love the movie, but that specific version I probably won't watch again. But
all right, so now it's time to talk about Rent Live, which is kind of the elephant in the room here. The general consensus is that Rent Live was not good at all. There were some people that actually really liked it. Where do you fall on that issue?
Well, it wasn't like what I was picturing when I would listen to the music, honestly. So I still feel like I'd be in the middle with that. It was good, but at the same time wasn't my favorite. But I still really thought it was decent enough to watch it.
Yeah, I think Rent Live had so many things go wrong before it even started. I mean, for one, Rent is a cult classic. The original Broadway cast was good enough that they also, most of them, that could do the scheduling, starred again in the movie, which also did very well, not quite as well as the musical. But you have this phenomenal cast, and you have such a cult following that it's a pretty gutsy move to try to redo it again without any of the original cast, except for in the finale. Because you're saying, all right, we're going to do nothing you've ever done before, and please like it, or they're going to hate us. And then, to add onto that, one of the biggest things about these live musicals is that they're live. I think that that's one of the things that makes it a good crossing point between theater and TV, is that theater is always live and TV isn't always live. And I think that having that live musical, it gives it kind of energy because you know what's really happening and you can get invested. And I think for those of you that don't know, the actor who played Roger, one of the main characters, broke his ankle, I think, during the dress rehearsal. Now luckily they filmed the dress rehearsal so they could use that footage, but he couldn't perform live like they were intending. So the first half to 2/3 of the show was all pre-recorded, and they had a live audience. They were doing the best they could, and it wasn't bad, I don't think. But you could tell, as a theater performer myself, the dress rehearsal never has quite as much energy as the official performance does. And I think that they were having some technical issues, I think, with the microphones, and there were some things that didn't work with the cameras, and the audience wasn't quite perfect, and you get this kind of, it could have been so much better, but it wasn't. And I think that it could have been better had they just been able to do it live, but obviously they couldn't because so much of the show was kinetic. You couldn't have a Roger that couldn't walk.
Another show that I want to get your opinion on, because I know you really love this show, was Newsies. What do you think of Newsies? I
actually really like Newsies. I think that it was very different from the traditional live TV musical. I think it was closer to something like Hamilton, but I think that it wasn't trying to be a live TV musical. It knew we're on a stage, we have the cast, but at the same time, it's something different. You know, because because this was after the original cast had left, and a lot of these are filmed with the cast, but they got the original cast back, and they also got people from national tours to come back, and they kind of assembled this almost dream cast to perform the show. And they added songs, like they added Crutchy's song that they added after the original actor had left the show, so he didn't even get to sing that until this. And I think that I really liked it just because it knew what it was. It was something that was the same format that people were used to, and so gave them the opportunity to be in the theater, but also gave them some things that you wouldn't be able to find elsewhere. And I think it did a very similar thing to Hamilton, where it wasn't trying to be more than it was, but it also was trying to use its format to the best of its ability.
Yeah, I did feel that Newsies was a very, very good example of these kind of shows. Like, yes, it did lean more toward, after seeing Hamilton, it does feel more like a Hamilton vibe, but I still really appreciated it. To me, it was really good. So do you like the TV adaptations, or how do you feel about them?
I think that TV musicals are an incredibly powerful tool. I talk a lot about trying to get accessibility in theater, but I think that as someone who loves theater and has the ability to go see live theater and to perform in live theater, I think that it's a shame that not as many people can get to see it as should. I'm making air quotes, but you can't see that because this is an audio format. But I think that any chance that non-theater people or people that like theater but can't afford to go see shows can see shows, I think is a tremendous, that's a big word, a tremendous gift. And I think that when done right, it can be a very enjoyable presentation. And I think when done wrong, it can be awful and make you want to stop listening to the original cast album. So I think if you have people that enjoy what they're doing and know the original production, and even some shows will consult the original cast and creative team if they're available to try to stay true to the original material. And I think if you have that, if you have the right circumstances and you put the right amount of effort in, I think it's going to reflect that, and I think it'll do well, and I think people will enjoy it. If you're doing it just to capitalize on the popularity of a show, then it's going to seem cash grabby, and it's not going to be good, and it's going to get backlash from people who like the show, and the people who didn't know about the show are just going to go, yeah, well, yeah. So I think if done right, it can be very powerful, but I think you need to do it right in order for it to work. How about you?
I totally agree with that. Yes, some of them are hits and some of them are misses, but I mean, I guess you could get that with anything, with movies, with actual Broadway shows themselves. It could either thrive or it could fail. But I completely agree with what you said, and I personally like them a lot because I can't go see Broadway shows all the time because who has the money for that?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I completely agree with what you said.
Well, that's this week's episode. Thanks for joining us.
Make sure to tune in next week to hear our thoughts on Broadway adaptations. And that's what you missed on Glee. Well, not really. See you.